Well, dear audience, welcome to the Cybersecurity Regulations Update for 2023. My name is Antti Tolvanen, and for the next 45 minutes, I'll be giving you an update on the cybersecurity regulations in EU and also slightly in the United States, looking at entities and products. Today is also the 5th anniversary webinar of the same topic. This started in 2019, and boy, has the regulatory landscape evolved. Today's agenda is as follows. We're going to start by a short recap of why cybersecurity of products and entities regulated. Then we're going to go look at the cybersecurity regulatory roadmap in EU until 27, and also we're going to look what's happening on the US side. Then at this point, I thought about giving an example how the cybersecurity regulations are impacting Etteplan. And then we're going for the beef of today. We're going to take a first look at the draft harmonized standards, or let's say the PRN 18031 series that are intended to be the harmonized standards for the Radio Equipment Directive delegated acts. And then we're going to continue a bit with cybersecurity regulation of products, and then I'm going to tell some of the experiences that Etteplan has so far had in the definition and certification of our secure product development lifecycle. If you have any questions, please write them in the chat. Oskari, who is from our marketing, who's on the line, will be asking me the questions in the end of the webinar, and please don't hesitate to contact me after the webinar if you have any questions or such. Okay, so recap, why is cybersecurity a legal requirement? The thing is that at least in EU, the legislation for product safety has traditionally been from the early 2000s, and it didn't really take into consideration that software can cause harm to people and property and environment and risk fundamental rights. And now it's actually turning into a whole horizontal legal requirement in EU, just due to these safety and fundamental rights risks that the new technologies such as artificial intelligence, connectivity, and autonomous robotics might bring. And this update of European legislation started, I think, in 2018 and 19. Well, I think they called it the new customer agenda or something like that. But now they are wrapping up this 5-year cycle of updating the legislation, and they're currently initiating the next step, which is you might have seen somewhere that there are thoughts about regulating the addictive behaviors that social media, computer games, and other digital platforms can create. So protection and regulation go hand in hand. So why also this regulation? It costs more money to develop secure by design products and digital services, and the EU is using as the basis for this regulation that cybersecurity incidents are very costly. You can, for example, read many different studies. One is from IBM, where the average cost of a cybersecurity incident in critical infrastructure could be around $5 million US dollars in Europe. On the US side, they are more expensive, these data breaches. And I remember seeing an EU official when she introduced the Finnish audience to the Cyber Resilience Act that they estimate that in Germany the cybersecurity incident costs alone are 200 billion euros. So these are significant, these costs, and it's probably forcing manufacturers of software and physical devices to implement secure development life cycles and make secure by design products should have a very short payback period. So that's why this regulation is going forward. The incident costs are much higher than the costs of developing and maintaining devices that are secure by design. So that's the background. Let's look at what's happening in EU now. So now at this moment there are certain legislations in effect. I have here in the diagram, I have the cyber security regulation of entities like companies and organizations affecting their purchasing requirements and other requirements as orange, and then I have in blue cybersecurity regulations of products. At the moment, some of the product-related cybersecurity regulations that are in effect in EU are, of course, GDPR, that regulates how privacy-related data is used. The e-privacy directive, what the provider of a digital service or an application is allowed to store on the user's terminal device. Then medical and in vitro diagnostic devices have quite recently, about 5 years ago, got the new regulations where there's state-of-the-art information security required. So in these new cybersecurity regulations for products, these IVD and medical devices are exempted. They have own regulations. And this also civil aviation has cybersecurity regulations in place. In less than 1 year, we expect that the NIS2 directive will start applying fully in all the member states. And for example, in Finland, the Finnish government is importing the NIS2 directive requirements to national legislation on a de minimis principle. So they will go with the minimum level of requirement. Some countries have much heavier requirements, additional ones for national reasons. On the same time, there are certain product cybersecurity regulations that start also applying in 24. There's the General Product Safety Regulation that now has been edited so it covers software products, and it also has one cybersecurity requirement that none of these a malicious third party shouldn't be able to cause such a cybersecurity incident on product that it causes harm. Then on automotive side, the United Nations R155 regulation on cybersecurity of road vehicles starts fully applying in July this year. It means that all road vehicles that are manufactured from July next year forwards need to be developed and manufactured according to a cybersecurity management system. On the marine side, the classification societies have agreed on new regulations that shipbuilders need to comply with in order to get the insurance for the ships, and practically for all the new ships that are for which the construction begins, all the computer-based systems need to be developed according to secure by design principles, and there are many IEC 6244341 and 42 requirements that are mandatory for computer-based systems in ships. So this impacts the whole shipbuilding industry supply chain. Then some other product regulations. There's the digital identity wallet that is being developed. I won't go deeper into that. But then related to cybersecurity, there are also two directives or regulations that are starting to apply next year. The first one is the Product and Artificial Intelligence Liability Directive. So I will explain the Product Liability Directive, the new one, later in this presentation. Then there's also the Data Act that has also been approved and should start applying in about 1 year, and of course on legacy products a little bit later. But this it's like the GDPR on use data. So all use data on devices become the property of the user that has generated the data, not necessarily the product manufacturer, or if the product manufacturer leases it to the user. And there's also rules on how to share data to third parties. So this will probably disrupt a bit industrial equipment manufacturers' after-sales business models. Now, then the next big step after NIS2 directive is that the Radio Equipment Directive Delegated Acts start applying on August 1st, 25. This was postponed with 1 year because the harmonized standards were not ready. And today we will take a dive into what's in the draft standards. Then in let's say 26 or 27, there will be the remaining cybersecurity legislations in EU which will start applying. The biggest one is the Cyber Resilience Act, where there's going to be technical requirements, process requirements, type approval requirements, and such for all devices with digital elements, all software and all physical products that have a data connection to another device. Concurrently with the Cyber Resilience Act, also the machinery regulation will start applying. It is already in force. I'll have some details on the machinery regulation, and also the Artificial Intelligence Act, which is also facing the last trilogy negotiation. in some weeks is also expected to start applying fully. Then the concept of EU Cybersecurity Act certification schemes are making a comeback because they are referenced to in the Cyber Resilience Act, the EU Common Criteria Scheme, the Cloud Services Scheme, and the 5G Scheme. So this might also become relevant. So this is what's happening in EU, and the main point why showing all of these regulations, especially for products in this kind of way, is that there's a principle that the more specific legislations rule over the more general ones, and if we think that there's a machinery manufacturer that has radio connectivity in the product and edge artificial intelligence that is autonomous in some way, probably it will be affected by General Product Safety Regulation, Machinery Regulation, Cyber Resilience Act, Artificial Intelligence Act, and maybe some others. So this is a big challenge for the compliance teams and the product development teams in companies also. Good. I will now go forward and let's take a look at what's happening in US. So in United States, the regulation has mostly been let's say, not regulating products for placing products on the market and selling products, but the purchasing requirements, and especially purchasing requirements of federal government. You can see the split to hard and soft law. In US, there has been passed in 2020 the law for purchasing requirements of IoT devices to federal government, the IoT Cybersecurity Improvement Act, and then the big thing was in spring 21 was the Executive Order 14028 on improving nation cybersecurity that has quite a big impact on the purchasing requirements of federal government. On the side of that, the NIST was delegated with the role of developing standards for this executive order, and they have come up with thick guidances on secure software development framework and secure supply chain. And then about in 22, I think it was sometime in September 22, the Office for Management and Budget in US gave a memorandum where these NIST guidances practically would become mandatory for the software and device suppliers to federal government, and that these suppliers need to attest that they comply with these requirements. And then later on, now the Federal Acquisition Regulation purchasing requirements, this is being amended. And then during this year, there has been some updates to National Cybersecurity Strategy, and also the Critical Infrastructure Security Agency has come up with a recommendation for secure by design and default. But there hasn't really been any other, let's say, hard law on regulating products so far. The only exception is medical devices and in vitro diagnostic devices. So FDA has been developing a new pre-market guidance for medical devices for a very long time, and now they finally gave a deadline that they will not accept any new market submissions unless that are not developed, that you don't follow a secure product development life cycle according to the guidances and also certain technical requirements. Now, the second big thing that happened was yesterday in US. You might have all seen in the news that the executive order on artificial intelligence came out. You can now read the full text on the White House pages. It was not yet available yesterday. The only hard law in US that I have seen indications of from the National Cybersecurity Strategy are privacy legislation, security labeling, so that for all devices and software, it would need to be communicated to users what are the security mechanisms, functionalities, has a secure product development lifecycle be followed, and for how long there will be updates. And also they could prepare a regime where companies that actually develop secure by design and default products would get some kind of liability safe harbor in case of cybersecurity incidents. This is US, how it goes. Let's go to cybersecurity regulation of entities. I think you've most heard already about the NIS2 directive. So this is the cybersecurity regulation of entities. In this one that started applying sometime in 2018, it focused mainly on bringing some information security management requirements to the classical critical infrastructure sectors like energy industry, logistics, financial market, and healthcare, and also the digital providers. Now in NIS2, the scope of essential and important entities of the critical infrastructure is significantly widened, so it also covers the water supply, all kind of digital infrastructures and service providers, public government, and space. And what is interesting here in important entities that there's chemicals production, all the way from chemicals mixtures to the point where a chemical gets a mechanical form that is more important than the chemical forms. That's called the chemical composition. That's article. So also chemicals, metals, and some mechanical manufacturing will be regulated, and then all manufacturing of electrical equipment. Those are going to be important entities. Then there's of course logistics, waste management, and food production and distribution that are in the scope. And what's important to know about NIS2 directive? So it's already it has been in the official journal. It has to be implemented to member state laws in 11.5 months. It applies on medium and large size companies. So if your company has more than 50 people or more than 10 million euros aggregate revenues, then and you're active in those industries that were listed, then you're going to be a NIS2 important or essential entity. And it's valuable to think that, does this impact your customers also? One important definition, because this is the Network and Information System Directive, so the definition of NIS is that it's all the devices, software, and networks that transmit digital data. And this is practically operational systems such as industrial automation, digital services that are being provided by many different companies, and all kinds of operational software. And what we can see here from the previous page, we have here the managed service providers and managed security services providers. So entities that offer network and information system installation and maintenance. For example, software and industrial automation integrators like Etteplan, we become managed service providers and essential entities. And Etteplan will be supervised by Traficom in Finland. They're going to be our national entity that supervises us. So that's very important to know, that being in this managed service provider business becomes regulated. So what the main point, if you want to familiarize with NIS2, is to read Article 21. So this states that the appropriate information security management systems become mandatory for entities. One common standard is ISO 27001, but legislators don't want to promote any specific method or standard. Then but you can also see that some kind of secure product or software development lifecycle process or similar becomes practically mandatory for all the network and information systems that entities use in their operations and in the provision of their services. Entities need to consider cybersecurity over the whole life cycle of these operational systems. Then there's also an interesting point that the direct suppliers and service providers related to this network and information systems also need to have appropriate information security management systems and secure development procedures. So it's important to see that these NIS2 requirements will roll down the supply chain. And then I heard a couple of weeks ago that the work on the implementing act on digital service providers, including also these managed service providers and companies like Etteplan, with more detailed information security management requirements. The work has been started, and we'll maybe hear something, see some drafts coming out in the end of the year or early next year. So this is the situation with NIS2 and regulation of entities. Let's go into cybersecurity regulation of products. I will today be I've mentioned this. I mentioned in the beginning in the roadmap the essential ones, and on this slide you can see on the left side 5 important product safety legislations: General Product Safety Regulation, Radio Equipment Directive Delegated Acts, Artificial Intelligence Act, Machinery Regulation, and Cyber Resilience Act, which all include cybersecurity requirements. And you can in the third column see the schedule for when these regulations or directives have entered into force, when they have been published in the official journal, and what is the date when they will apply fully in EU. Now there's still 2 of these product safety legislations which have not been yet published in official journal, the Artificial Intelligence Act and Cyber Resilience Act. I expect that they will be adopted by EU Parliament and Commission and EU Council by end of this year or latest during the first quarter of next year. And the same goes for this product liability directive. Now, when thinking about software and product development, the important thing is harmonized standards. So today we'll be talking about the harmonized standards for radio equipment directive. It's good for you also to know that the standardization work for Artificial Intelligence Act has been started already, and the draft standardization requests are being prepared both for Machinery Regulation and Cyber Resilience Act. So, and then later, let's take a look at what's coming in the Product Liability Directive. It's not a safety legislation, but it dictates what happens when there's an accident that causes harm to people or property, and there's no person that can be directly blamed on national level, so then the responsibility goes on a EU level. Well, usually when I talk about these EU cybersecurity regulations, these are the first reactions when people hear that this cannot be right, the regulation is so wide and so big, and then some people have told me that I shouldn't draw that hasty conclusions that this regulation is coming, and the third one is that the EU will surely do something about this to make it easier, but well, okay, with the Radio Delegated Act, they gave 1 extra year because the standards were not ready, but otherwise this is how it looks like. Good. Before going into the Radio Equipment Directive standards, I want to just give you an example of cybersecurity regulations have impacted Etteplan. So due to NIS2 with its requirements for managed service providers, and that Etteplan has a big customer base of companies that are in chemicals industry or they manufacture electrical equipment, we noticed that we need to certify our information security management system. So we are certifying the sites where we do software development, and also we have applied for certification of our secure product development lifecycle according to IEC 6244341 in order to be ready for Cyber Resilience Act requirements, and also for the other product safety regulations where secure product development lifecycle is a mandatory part, like for example medical device regulations where they are harmonizing the IEC 8100151 secure product development lifecycle standard in May 24. Maybe to explain a little bit, Etteplan works with product suppliers, companies that develop products, equipment, machinery, software companies, and then we also act as an integrator, and we serve also asset owners. So we're very tightly working with many players that are in different stages of the supply chain, and it actually, cybersecurity becomes regulated in the operative systems and products of Etteplan. We have some products like production testers and in our customers, and we support our customers in product and machinery development and also in the operational systems integration and maintenance. So this is very important for us to be competitive in the future. At Etteplan, we have a big team in software development, ranging for embedded devices to digital services, and this kind of the ability to develop these using our processes is very important for us, and that's why the secure product development lifecycle comes into the picture. Also, we are supporting our customers in digitalizing their manufacturing, starting from the industrial automation all the way to the cloud and analytics, and here also these are operational systems impacted by NIS2. And then the third service area of Etteplan is technical communication solutions, and we're one of the biggest suppliers in Europe related to technical product information, and cybersecurity related labeling product information becomes mandatory, for example, via Cyber Resilience Act and slightly also via the Red Delegated Acts. Good, so let's get to the beef. I have prepared for you an agenda related to the Red Delegated Acts Harmonized Standards Draft, the PRED 80031 series. I thought about explaining again why based on the Radio Equipment Directive, most legacy wireless IoT devices that are sold in EU today become illegal to sell. I'm going to explain that, and let's look at what we knew about the Delegated Acts and standardization request before before these standards became available to buy from standardization organizations. We're going to look at the table of contents, what's the structure and applicability of the requirements. We're going to look at some definitions like the assets and the use cases. And then there are two different kinds of requirements. There are the ones that use decision trees and the ones that, let's say, do not use decision trees for applicability and how we can support. So maybe this was one of the biggest questions about 1 year ago, that could it be so that it's really illegal that wireless IoT devices become illegal to sell? And also it's a big question that why do all the manufacturers and importers of wireless IoT devices need to take care of the vulnerabilities over their life cycle? So in EU there are definitions that are related to products. The thought about placing a product on the market, when you make it commercially available for the first time in EU, that's called placing on the market. And one big misconception is that if you have placed a product on EU market before this red delegated act start applying, then you can continue selling. But that's really not it. The important thing is this, when the product has been made available on the market. So actually Article 6 of Radio Equipment Directive states that member states shall take appropriate measures to ensure that radio equipment is made available on the market only if it complies with the directive. None of these other product safety regulations that I'm talking about today have this kind of an explicit statement that states that these today's wireless IoT devices become illegal to sell. The thing is that you need to play, if you want to continue selling these products, you need to redesign them so that they meet these requirements, and then you need to either via self-declaration or a notified body you need to renew your CE marking. And it was also before these harmonized standards were available, there was a big discussion that should a notified body now be as backup be used for renewing the declaration of conformity before EU gave this extra 1 year. So this is the background for why these wireless IoT devices become illegal to sell. It's the Article 6 in the Radio Equipment Directive. If you have discussions in your company about could this be right, so Article 6. So let's go forward. Then you might have seen that here is what is said in the Red Delegated Acts DE 33DEF about the requirements. So it's some kind of a protection for degradation of service attacks. It shouldn't disturb the network, and then these radio devices shall protect the privacy of the user, and then they should also contain mechanisms to prevent fraud if there's any monetary transactions. Then came the standardization request, and you can see here below that some of these requirements were common for all category, all these essential requirements, and some were unique. And in this request, it was that they shall provide technical solutions in support of these essential requirements. So let's see what kind of technical solutions they have developed. Here you can see the table of contents of this whole standard series. This is available for buying, at least in Estonian standards, and I think in Denmark. I think it might be even today still readable free of charge in Estonian standards, as it's open there for giving comments. And you can see it's quite a big number, lots of text and lots of rows. And well, to ease up, we can see here that many of these security mechanisms or capabilities, they have this first requirement in the group is applicability of this security mechanism, and then we have certain requirements like confidential cryptographic keys, general equipment capabilities, and cryptography, which are presumably mandatory for all radio devices, irrespective of what's the intended use. Now, to define are these requirements applicable or not, it's important to understand. It's important to look into what's really go through row by row. And I browsed through the standards. I could see that the most important things that you need to understand are what are the network security, privacy, and financial assets that are in the product. You need to understand the intended use, intended operational environment, interfaces, authentications, passwords, other functional safety requirements, alternative security measures, is this product updatable, and such. And so these are the things that you should map before you go into the actual requirement specification. There's also a little bit of threat and risk analysis needed. Is there a replay attack? Otherwise, the standardization organizations have been quite busy in making the threat modeling for you, so that you can just directly, based on the intended use assets and operational environment, proceed in conducting the requirement specification. So what else do we have? Maybe when you purchase the standards, it's good for you to read through what are the security, network, and privacy and financial assets, what are their definitions, and also good for the team to understand what is this intended use and intended use environment. These standards do not contain this definition. I took it from another EU document where this intended purpose of a product is defined. So I thought about going through two of the examples of requirements. So the first example would be the applicability of access control mechanism. And the requirement starts with two bullets of requirements. Is this product accessible for all kinds of users? And is this product then, or is this environment of use limiting the access to the product? And as you can see, these requirements have by the standardization organization been taken into this kind of decision-making tree, which eases how to understand how is this requirement applicable for the device. And this decision-making tree is also used in the assessment of the product. Now, there are certain documentation that are needed, that you need to make and add to the technical file of the product when you decide it, or if you see that you have already a secure by design product and you just want to renew the declaration of conformity. So for this one particular requirement, you need to describe the selected path through the decision tree. This in the standard examples of how to do it, justify it, and then you just need to document each asset and security mechanism and software part that is in scope of this requirement, and document how this mechanism is implemented. Probably this is already done during secure by design phase in a SPDL process, where you make the implementation specifications for the software. And then is the assessment phase. So there's a thing called conceptual assessment. Have this mechanism been implemented where required? And the justifications here on the left side, are they correct? Then you need to assess, are the assets correctly documented? It's a functional completeness assessment, and then also a functional sufficiency assessment. Are the mechanisms implemented where needed? I didn't see any traces in the standard that this needs to be an independent party or an accredited third party. So EU's objective is clearly that the self-declarations of radio equipment can continue as today. But I've seen that many companies are using third parties or even notified bodies in order to get more evidence for the customers that these products really fulfill the requirements. And maybe one important point is also, you could see that there's more than 100 requirements in all the three standards in total. So the scope of needed documentation and the specs, they vary a bit between each requirement. So it's important to understand what is required by each requirement. And these are, of course, just drafts. So this was the decision tree approach, and applicability of is a certain requirement needed. You can see that this intended use environment, assets, interfaces are really important factors. Then let's look at the mandatory requirements, the general equipment capabilities. You can here see that in the product there should be up-to-date software and hardware with no publicly known exploitable vulnerabilities, and this requirement actually impacts the whole life cycle of the product. It needs to be all the time that it's made available in EU, that you sell new products, that they need to contain up-to-date software. Then there are some other requirements that are actually very much related to security verification and validation testing, and which are not, let's say, the security mechanism, but other kinds of technical solutions, perhaps this kind of process topics. So let's look at this up-to-date software and hardware with no publicly known exploitable vulnerabilities. So they require a software bill of materials affecting the assets and a hardware bill of materials affecting assets. So it's a good thing, perhaps not to specify a microcontroller or processor that has exploitable vulnerabilities at this point and which has adequate hardware-based security functionalities. And then, in addition to having this bill of materials, you need to have lists of the publicly known vulnerabilities and also justify the remediations, mitigations, or why this cannot be exploited. And then this is assessed by this is practically a vulnerability testing that you do, that you see that are these really mitigated, these exploitable vulnerabilities. And then of course in the vulnerability testing you see also can you find some other exploitable vulnerabilities. So this is one example of how these mandatory requirements go. So there's a lot of, let's say, vulnerability testing and functional verification of security functionalities, what is needed over in these PRN 18031 standards. And maybe one thing here to note is that companies need to take care of the vulnerability management let's see, to make sure that the radio devices don't have exploitable vulnerabilities. So it could be a really good idea now when you start updating your wireless IoT devices to continue their sales in EU, that you also define a secure product development lifecycle. So you have a process for the management of security-related issues and the security update management. So I don't know what is your thinking, but when I read through this and all the requirements that are needed, I got this feeling that perhaps more budget is needed. So some people to take care of all this additional documentation, of course, maybe additional specialists that are capable to specify and implement and assess also all of these new security mechanisms. So this is one of the conclusions. But the Etteplan can support in many different ways now. If you guys are interested in cooperating, so we can support the design, verification, CE marking, and also in the secure product development lifecycle process. As you could see, the work starts by the product concept, what's the intended use and user environment, and defining the system architecture with the assets and the interfaces. So Etteplan has experienced embedded software developers, experience with radio devices, and also with implementation and verification of security functions. So Etteplan can support in this quite end-to-end and also support with the related documentation and support with any questions you have related to compliance and CE marking things, and also in developing the process. So please contact me if there's any questions or needs. Good. This was the part about the Radio Equipment Directive delegated acts. I will now continue a bit on the other cybersecurity regulation products, and here maybe the most important one is the Cyber Resilience Act. This is horizontal product security regulation. It's already in the COREPER agreement, so it's the final trilogue negotiations that have started already. Practically, cybersecurity conformance becomes mandatory for all products with digital elements, all standalone software that are distributed in a commercial setting in EU. They have now defined a good way how to exclude open source software communities, so they wouldn't get all of these requirements. And this is safety legislation. And I already mentioned that this applies to products that have software and hardware products that have a direct or indirect data connection to a device or a network. And as with Radio Equipment Directive, medical IVD, civil aviation, automotive have been excluded because these have own regulations. For those of you that represent medical device companies, I'm thinking that for how long will medical device companies not get as heavy requirements on medical devices for cybersecurity as will come with Cyber Resilience Act for any product. So I wonder, will EU do something about that? Then it's important to know that digital services are mostly regulated by NIS2 because it's part of the service provision system, but the apps and the backend parts that are needed for these apps or front ends to work properly, they are regulated under CRA. So you need to get the CE mark for those also. So what's required? There's many pages of requirements, but the most important one is that there's both technical and lifecycle requirements on the products. There's a standardization request that is being drafted. It's very useful also for purely software companies to familiarize with the Red Delegated Act's requirements in order to train up people that have this compliance expertise, because at least for, I think for wired IoT device, I would expect that this red hens would be also reused in Cyber Resilience Act, pretty much because the threat model is pretty much the same. Then there's going to be a third-party conformance assessment for high-risk products. Now, the list of high-risk products with third-party cybersecurity conformance assessment has been significantly cut. The main physical product that is still there is gateways, routers, and switches, where the main intended use of the product is like gateway functionality. If it has some other main functionality, then it wouldn't be subject to this third-party assessment. Then also there's a reference to the EU CC certification scheme. There's hardware devices with security boxes. If a company relies on physical isolation of the PCBA with the software for cybersecurity in the product, looks like there could be some additional third-party certification requirements. Timeline. So as mentioned, I guess it's going to be in the official journal before New Year or after that. Then there's going to be a detailed guideline for CRA implementation in early 25. Then what everybody needs to understand that is in business, that 2 years after the Cyber Resilience Act has been in the official journal, you need to have a formal process for managing vulnerabilities and incidents related to the software or hardware component or the product or the machinery that you are providing, you have made available, that you sell in EU. All legacy products that you're going to keep on market from 26 forwards, you need to take care of the vulnerabilities and have a process for that. And then in 27, after 3 years, then all the new products that you put on the market, they need to fully comply with they need to conform with all of the Cyber Resilience Act requirements. And it's also good to know any legacy products that undergo significant changes or changes to intended use, they need to be re-CE marked according to Cyber Resilience Act. So this is maybe one of the key takeaways, that put your secure product development lifecycle in place. I still have some time here left, so I'm gonna talk about the Artificial Intelligence Act. It contains also some cybersecurity requirements, but perhaps one of the most important things is related to Artificial Intelligence Act, and I know that we have many machinery suppliers in the audience and also other device manufacturers, is this concept of a safety component. In Artificial Intelligence Act, there's the concept of high-risk artificial intelligence, and these kind of high-risk artificial intelligence systems or high-risk artificial intelligence is system or product is also let's say a machinery that contains an AI system like edge, like machine vision. When it malfunctions or is subject to a cybersecurity incident that makes it to work improperly, if it can cause harm to safe people, say health and safety of persons, then the safety component is a high-risk artificial intelligence system. And if this device has this kind of a high-risk AI system, then it might need to undergo a third-party conformity assessment. So when you think about adding artificial intelligence to physical products, it's good also to remember that it might require quite a heavy quality management system to do that. This is publicly available since a couple of months back. So EU is now, Sensenelec is working on the harmonized standards for high-risk artificial intelligence systems. There's about 40 different standards, And as you can see, there's going to be harmonized standards for cybersecurity, robustness, and quality management system and risk management. So if you perceive that you're going to be in the business of high-risk AI, this is something to start digging into. These are going to be widely based on the international standards for artificial intelligence that are being developed. Then you might yesterday and today have seen that there's an executive order on the safe, secure, and trustworthy development and use of artificial intelligence. And I haven't had the possibility yet to analyze this in more detail, but one of the important topics is ensuring the safety and security of artificial intelligence. And the scope here is much wider than the European AI Act. So please take a look if you're in the business of artificial intelligence. In machinery regulation, there's going to be cybersecurity requirement, or there are now new cybersecurity requirements. Machinery needs to be protected against corruption, and then you need to ensure the safety and reliability of the control systems. The main thing is that machine product suppliers, integrators, and asset owners cannot rely legally on that the operational technology network is isolated. The machinery needs to be secure by design, and the control systems need to be secure by design from a legal perspective. And then also you need to create documentation as evidence how you have verified that these functionalities are on the correct level. And now one of the most important points in machinery regulation is that if there's a safety incident involving machinery, even if it's caused by cybersecurity, and this product has been on the market already for a long time, based on the machinery directive, this union safeguard process will start running based on machinery regulation and looking at all the requirements that are in place in the machinery regulation. So there could be this possibility that if there's an incident, that existing machinery that are now on the market and there's a safety incident, that they might be recalled though they are totally compliant with the machinery directive, but they are not compliant with the regulation. And maybe that's one of the important things I wanted to mention about this machinery regulation, that member states have the possibility to end the making available of directive era products after 3.5 years in 27. But it's not mandatory for them to stop the sales like in radio equipment directive. But the thing here is that they can use this market surveillance and safeguard procedure to end the sales of dangerous products already today, even because based that they are not fulfilling these requirements. And then I already mentioned this vulnerability handling process in Cyber Resilience Act. Cyber Resilience Act is talking about making available on the market. Maybe before wrapping up, I just wanted to mention to you guys that the Product Liability Directive contains some interesting things. The Product Liability Directive will contain software. Software is a product. And then damage now also will include medically recognized harm to psychological health and destruction or irreversible corruption of data. So EU is also starting to look at this, let's say, the psychological risks caused by new technologies. And in the definition of defectiveness, it's actually if the product does not comply with applicable product safety requirements, including safety relevant cybersecurity requirements, then the liability is on the manufacturer. And it's already then when it goes to court and there's burden of proof, if it can be evidence that this product doesn't fulfill mandatory safety requirements, including also the cybersecurity requirements, then it's the fault of the manufacturer. So EU has on all layers regulated software and making it more, let's say, manufacturers of software and hardware need to be more careful in ensuring that their products meet the regulations on the market. Good. Maybe the conclusions we have discussed here already about regulation of entities, of the products, and the liability directive. And all of these directives and regulations contain many different administrative fines. Good to remember that if a product does not fulfill the EU safety legislation, usually liability insurances could be voided. That is also something to talk about with the legal team. Then who is enforcing all of this legislation? So the legal authority, the national authorities probably don't have resources, but you have seen in the privacy scene that it's privacy activists that are enforcing these regulations. Now, if we think about the cybersecurity becomes a regulatory requirement, you can pen test a device that you own. That I've understood, as you stay out just from these backend systems. And I think it will be quite easy for competing product manufacturers to acquire the products of the competitors and just check against the radio equipment directive, HEN standards. Does this product really have the security functionalities that their user manuals say that they have? So also to say that there's a much wider range of entities that might utilize this legislation for competitive reasons. And Data Act I mentioned already. So there's now an opportunity to win market share, and maybe laggards will experience their products becoming illegal to sell in EU. Of course, there's the rest of the world market then available. So I thought about talking about our experiences. So we have now defined a secure product development lifecycle according to IEC 6244341. We did it in first half of this year. We have now applied for certification with Certex, that is a certification body in Switzerland specialized on functional safety and cybersecurity. And we've also noticed that this SPDA process is enabling new services. So I'm providing training workshops. If you're interested, we can discuss if you want to go on a more strategic level. Then, as we have developed the SPDL process for ourselves, we can also develop it for you. And of course, what we want to do with you guys is develop secure by design products, devices, equipment, machinery, applications, digital services, and various operative systems. And then, of course, this security verification, validation services, functional testing, and office security testing, something that we provide in-house and through our partner network. And Etteplan is supporting making these technical documentations that are needed. Well, the experiences then, before wrapping up. So the first learning that we've had, that it takes a long time to build internal understanding about the magnitude of the regulatory market disruption. We discussed this with our internally and with our customers for a long time, and then maybe that this disruption is really taking place. That takes time for companies to understand. Then the second one is these elements of secure by design, to understand this also in all of the functions. Let's say in companies, people understand information security management systems quite well. They have them and they have been trained. But then comes this little part that is the secure product or software development lifecycle that is in some companies' information security management systems in the Annex 14.2. But to understand that it's a life cycle thing, and then these technical requirements for the solution to mitigate cybersecurity risk of the whole life cycle of the product. So those are the main things about building understanding. And then when you then finally get going, it's really beneficial to have a product, a secure by design product development project that you have ongoing concurrently, so you get to train people into this SPDA process, and also you can verify the process in actual development work. And here I want to see that we can support you in this development of secure by design process. But it's really good to make the formal process and update your QMS or information security management system at the same time. And then the third one is also that when we now have engaged in this and it has deepened our understanding about product cybersecurity in different industries also, it has really helped at least Etteplan in developing new customer relationships with the companies that want to be market leaders in the field of product security or secure digital services. And also we have found many new interesting partners like downstream to act as our supply partners. And this has really opened up many new doors. So these are the three main experiences that I would like to share with you. And perhaps now we could go into the questions. Oskari, what do we have?
Yes, we have a few questions here. First question. Did I understand correctly? Standard drafts of HN 18031 are still available to access for free somewhere. Is it possible to get the
go
link
to
to
Estonian standards. There's this commenting portal that they have. The commenting period might have ended already yesterday. I didn't check, but you could go and check, and I think you can buy all the standard series for 150 euros from Estonian standards. So that's my recommendation. If they're not available in the commenting portal, just buy the standards.
Okay, second question. Is the notified body required for mandatory requirements?
No, actually, in EU, you don't really even need to have, for example, in EU, there's no, for example, you don't need to do accredited EMC testing, but if you don't do it, you might get problems later when competitors come in, and especially outside EU. So no, you don't need to have a notified body for radio devices in case you comply with all the harmonized standards that are applicable for the product.
Okay, next question. Is product liability directive impacting only private end users or public, for example, government customers as well?
Product liability directive it kind of impacts the manufacturer or the importer of the product in EU, and then it's if there's any damage happened to a person. So to that question, maybe I would say that it impacts the both parties, the party that has been harmed and the party that has manufactured the product.
Okay, next question. What are the differences on how NIS2 and CRA apply to electronics/embedded system products? Yes,
that's a really good question. So CRA is a product safety legislation, and it contains CE marking requirements. NIS2 is a legislation on the information security management systems that are used by entities, and it just requires that whoever supplies operational systems to essential and important entities needs to make this delivery of the installation and maintain it, needs to do it securely. So that's the big difference. So NIS2 doesn't contain any CE marking requirements. It's sort of mandatory purchasing requirements related to the quality management system and information security management system capabilities of whoever comes and installs and maintains the product. And of course, we can think that if a NIS2 entity buys IoT devices for operational systems directly from a certain vendor, they should perhaps request that these products are secure by design. You can see this in some of the purchasing requirement, general terms and conditions of companies, that they demand that their suppliers, all IT infra, needs to be secure by design. Schneider Electric has that kind of requirement if you want to have a practical public example.
All right, next question. How is the FOSS/open source software now excluded or handled from Cybersecurity Act point of view?
Yes, so these companies that are using open source software as part of their product need to take care of the vulnerabilities and kind of follow up from the open source communities on the vulnerabilities of these open source components and report upstream. And if there's a vulnerability in the product that is due to this open source component, they need to report it to the open source community. But these open source communities do not have, they are not legally, they don't have legal obligations to follow up on the vulnerabilities of the open source, whatever the open source community has made, and to CE mark all of these components. So there's a long section in the latest version of the Cyber Resilience Act that explains how open source communities are excluded. But whoever turns that open source component uses it in a product or a software component, they commercially make available in EU, they carry the vulnerability management responsibility, and they need to CE mark whatever is the software part or the hardware part where they have embedded this open source component. So they need to CE mark that.
All right, last question. Will we share this material after the presentation?
That's a good question. Oskari has made a recording and he will make this available in YouTube. I think Oskari will send some follow-up emails to the respondents, and maybe I'll also send to ask if there's anything where we can support you guys. But there will be a recording in YouTube in I think, is it Oskari sometime next week?
Possibly this week already.
Possibly this week already. Good, good. Hey, thank you everybody for your attention. I think we went a bit over time. I was optimistic about the schedule. Thank you so much for participating. We had a record audience today. And thank you for your interest in product cybersecurity and secure by design. And thank you for your time. Wish you a great continuation to the autumn, and let's stay in touch.